2. There will be, I think, a number of people today listening to this on live stream. I'll just remind those of you who are participating in the meeting via the live stream that if you would like to make any comments for the council and staff to take into consideration on any particular subject that the council is dealing with, please send those by email to publiccomments@vopnc.org, public comments, 2 C's, at vopnc.org. Those will be received by the clerk tonight or tomorrow and circulated to the council and staff members as appropriate. They will not be read, however, at this meeting. And another reminder to those of you who are here, in a couple minutes, the village clerk will pick up the sign-up list at the end of at the back of the room. Those are for any of you who are here in Village Hall who wish to comment on any subject whatsoever, whether it's on the agendas tonight or not, to the village council. And that list will be picked up in a few minutes by the village clerk, at which point we'll more or less consider the list closed, depending on the number of persons on it and issues that come up. So with that, welcome again to all of you here. We'll go to agenda item number 2, which is reports from the village manager and the village council. And I'll start with Jeff Sanborn.
Thank you, John. 2 things I'd like to comment on. The first is that I think a lot of folks know that for a very long time we've been kind of shorthanded in our planning department. And we're very happy to announce that we, over the last 2 weeks, have hired 2 new planners. So we'll be at full strength starting about the middle of May. Some folks are aware that we have long had a desire to fill one of those positions with a transportation planner. That was very difficult to do in reality. So we've kind of shifted gears, and we've hired a senior planner and a planner, and we intend to build or grow that transportation planning expertise within the staff. The second thing has to do with property tax forecasts. If folks were kind of paying attention to my budget preview during the last council meeting, you probably picked up on the fact that at that time we were recommending that the council, when they do eventually adopt a budget, stay in line with the property tax structure that was approved in last year's 5-year plan. At the same time, I announced that we had recently gotten some updated sales tax projections from the state that might impact that. We hadn't thoroughly analyzed that. We have done that analysis now, and what we will be recommending to the council going forward is a reduction of 1 penny in sales tax for each of those 5 years. For FY23, the impact would be, rather than a sales tax increase of a half a cent, it will be a decrease of a half a cent. That concludes my report.
Jeff, thank you very much. Good news all around. Planners, tax reduction. Nice. Looking to my reports, first in sort of 2 categories. With respect to government entities that I work with and taking a little bit of advantage of that, I'll start my report by saying that, as I'm sure you all know, and some of you helped today, this is the 200th anniversary of Frederick Law Olmsted, April 26th, also the council meeting. So this is the day we proclaimed a couple months ago to be Frederick Law Olmsted Day in the village of Pinehurst. And we are but a small piece, I think we would say, of that effort that is a nationwide, even international effort to recognize Mr. Olmsted and the many things he did for landscape architecture in America, and especially here in Pinehurst. So some of us took this day under the direction of Assistant Manager Doug Willardson and other staff to participate in a cleanup activity. Some of you may have been on teams for that. I was working over at the community center area, up and down Highway 211, back into the residential areas there. And Jeff, I think you led another effort at the Fair Barn. Is that true today?
I don't know if I was leading anything, but I participated.
We were all picking and grabbing. Yeah, it was very good. So thanks to the many members of staff and other volunteers who participated in that today. And thanks to all the council for helping to proceed with these anniversaries this year, Mr. Olmsted, and later Mr. Ross later this year, which will come along. I also want to make note I'll call it the 10% rule. Mr. Olmsted has 200 years of, it's his birthday today, and one of our shops in town, Cameron & Co., is 20 years this week. A long time, wonderful shop in the village of Pinehurst. I encourage all of you to use that shop as often as you can, and to thank Carolyn for her wonderful work. Someone in the audience is pointing somebody out to me, and I'm not sure if they want me to recognize them now. Is Carolyn right here? All right. Thank you, Tom. All right, so anyway, congratulations to Cameron & Co. for that anniversary. With respect to my mayor's responsibilities, several items. Thanks to residents Jan and Ron Kuklak, I was able to deliver a week before last, actually, a 100-year-old certificate to Mario De Capua, who moved to Pinehurst in 1983, built a home on Donald Ross Drive, still lives there today. So this was another fun event of awarding a resident their 100-year-old certificate. If you know of individuals who have recently achieved 100 years, please let us know, and I'd be happy to honor them as well. Also, I make note of three important dates in the last couple of weeks. The library transition took place on Monday, April 18th, Monday a week ago. The village is now taking responsibility with the library board and the staff of the village for the Given Library and the Tufts Archives, and we look forward to developing that entity to be the best resource it can be for all residents of Pinehurst. And in that regard, I'll just read a brief letter from Senator Tom McGinnis. Dear Mayor and Council members, congratulations on the move to take ownership of the Given Memorial Library and Tufts Archives. This transfer will add many new opportunities for our citizens to experience a great library and archives of our area. I appreciate the leadership that was applied by all parties to make that happen. With kindest personal regards, Senator Tom McGinnis. Secondly, we had a meeting of the Neighborhood Advisory Committee on the 18th, morning of the 18th, the same day as the library transition. We'll be talking further about the NAC and evolving plans for that a little bit later today. And then finally, on the 21st, I was a participant in and spoke briefly at a hearing hosted by the National Renaming Commission, which is responsible for the renaming of 9 military institutions in the United States. This council and myself wrote a letter of nomination to consider renaming Fort Bragg as Fort General George Marshall in honor of one of our longtime residents and a great soldier statesman of the 20th century. And there are many names being considered for the 9 institutions, and I made some brief comments in support of General Marshall, hopefully for Fort Bragg. With that, I'll conclude my comments, and I think today we'll start on my right, your left, with Jeff Morgan. Jeff?
I've got no reports, thank you.
Jane? No reports? All right. Patrick?
First of all, that was very good news from the village manager regarding
Pat, you're going to have to get your microphone there. Bring it up.
First of all, that was very good news from the village manager regarding the tax situation. I think that's good for all the residents. Two, I filled in over the weekend for the mayor on the salute to the military child held at the Arboretum. And it was a very good turnout. It was my first time filling in like that in that particular situation, and it was quite a good turnout, and there was some interesting and good entertainment provided by some folks from Fort Bragg. So those of you that were there, I'm sure you enjoyed it, and those that you're not, keep in mind it had been on hold for a couple of years due to COVID, and so I think the annual event will renew itself, and it was a good event. I think most of you might know that I was recently appointed to the TARPO RTAC. For those of you who don't follow that, that's the Triangle Area Rural Planning Organization Rural Transportation Advisory Committee. And I attended my first meeting. Councilwoman Hogeman was on call from that. And they were really talking a lot about electronic vehicles and the electronic vehicle infrastructure and things of that nature. There are a lot of questions were raised, mostly by others and a few by myself regarding the cost. They were talking about the need for a charging station every 50 miles in the state. But they hadn't flushed it out a lot. So I think there's going to be a lot more coming on this topic. And we, not only as the Village of Pinehurst, but citizens in general should sort of pay attention to this because it will have some fiscal implications going down the road. Also, to echo the earlier comments on the cleanup today, I participated in that, and the village staff was very helpful. We had a good, healthy amount of citizens who put on their gloves and masked up in some cases and went out there and picked up a lot of garbage. I personally can attest that cherry wine is the most popular drink along Monticello, just for those of you who wonder what we pick up along there. And afterwards, there was a very nice pizza lunch at the community center where the volunteers and the staff and all had a good time. So again, thank you to the village staff who helped make that happen. And I do think those of us who live here, it's worthwhile we roll up our sleeves every now and then and help keep this place as beautiful as it is. Lastly, I'd like to remind citizens and encourage citizens to keep their eyes on our Village of Pinehurst website for announcements regarding advisory committee vacancies and applying for advisory committees as citizens of the village. We have just 5 elected officials and 17,000 residents. We work a lot with volunteers from our community, and we have advisory committees and councils that need your participation, but we need you to volunteer to help with that. So please track that, and I encourage you to apply and submit applications as you see fit. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Lydia, please.
Excuse me. Thank you. And Patrick, to your point about electric vehicles, last month the CVB just reported the president of the Convention Business Bureau just went to a conference in Raleigh, and one big topic was electric vehicles and the increase in the number of electric vehicles and how we need to start preparing for the infrastructure for electric vehicles. Second, and Doug will report on this more later, but there was a meeting here in Village Hall last week to discuss walkways to be put in along Pine Vista and along McKenzie, and that went well. And then last, this ties in with something John just said, we just received from Congressman Richard Hudson, these are 2 statements he read into the record on the floor of the United States House of Representatives. One honors Mr. Olmsted and one honors Mr. Ross. So we have these, they're framed. Kelly's going to put them on the back if anybody wants to see them, but I'm turning them over to the village. Thanks, Sean. That's it.
Thank you, Lydia. We'll move then to agenda item number 3. It's a motion to approve the consent agenda. As always, though, before I do that, does any council member have any item in the consent agenda that he or she wishes to speak about or have withdrawn for a later discussion? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve all the items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda.
That's a motion by Jane Hogeman. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Pat Pizzella. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We'll go to item number 4, which is a discussion and consideration of harness track lease renewals. I'll turn that over to Mr. Sanborn or to Ms. Brooke, wherever she.
Right.
or-
Thanks,
or Mark.
John. Well, Mark's getting in position. We have a couple of buildings on the harness track facility that we have typically leased for commercial use, and it's time to renew those leases. So go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, we have the lease agreements up for the track restaurant and the tack shop. These are 5-year terms that would begin on July 1st and run through the end of June of 2027. This is a pretty typical renewal that we do. The last cycles, we only did 3 years on these because we wanted to stop short of the U.S. Open so that this renewal could pick up that. Typically in U.S. open years, the USGA has exclusive use of the harness track site, so there are clauses in here that address that for each of those two properties, and we would prorate their rent for the month of June because of the U.S. Open in 2024. Essentially, we're proposing a 4.7% increase in their rent for the coming year. This is based on the CPI as of the end of December. As I mentioned earlier, this was similar to what we do for staff cost of living increases, so we wanted to be consistent with that. But that's what we have before you tonight for discussion and consideration.
Thank you, Mark. There had been a question about the how that CPI index will work, and I think, Jeff, you provided a little clarity on that earlier this afternoon. Would you mind repeating that, please?
Yeah, for some, it might, catch some's interest that, 4.7% is lower than some of the more recently reported numbers of 7 or 8% that we're seeing year over year right now. What we typically do for all of our financial analysis with regard to CPI is that we take, for each month of a calendar year, we calculate the CPI change from 12 months prior to that time. And then the next month we do the same thing, and then the next month we do the same thing, all the way through the calendar year. And then we average all those numbers. So for this past year, that comes out to 4.7%. And while I guess I would caution or highlight or clarify that while that seems low in the market we're in right now, the same methodology will result in a higher CPI than the prevailing market might suggest when inflation's on the downturn. So it'll all come out in the end. It kind of evens out the bumps, though.
Right. And that's been our policy for some time, I think. Not a decade, but a few years.
3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I recall there was a change, but that's been it for the last 3 years. Jane, did you have a further question on that, or Jeff, or anybody else? Any questions on that?
I have 2 questions. Did you say it's 5-year, the lease renewals are 5-year?
That's correct.
Do we have any other leases that are coming up related to the harness track in the coming year?
The only other one we have is for Barn 19 for the horse transportation service, and their lease was renewed last year, and that does go through the U.S. Open. So ultimately, we'll get all those on the same cycle, but it's just the way they fell.
Help me understand, there's just one barn?
Correct.
Okay, what about the other barns? When do they come?
Those are annual. We
annual.
just did those fee increases in January with council as part of our annual fees and charges schedule. That's where those fall into.
Thank you.
And those are handled on a stall rental basis.
Correct.
What kind of base?
A stall rental rather than a whole barn.
A stall, okay, thanks.
What responsibilities do we have structurally for maintenance and repair?
Basically, all of the operational costs are borne by the tenants, with the exception of fire suppression systems in the restaurant. We do pay for hood inspections in the kitchen, fire extinguishers, things like that. Otherwise, all of your day-to-day expenses are borne by the tenants. We're responsible for structural, HVAC, any of those things, and but those costs are pretty minimal on an annual basis. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mark? I don't have a question, but I have an idea or a marker to put on here. We're coming to the end of the current harness season, and races were a couple of weeks ago, and we've been talking about potential for additional horses to be coming. I wonder if in the coming weeks, Jeff, with Mark, at one of our work sessions, we could kind of have a summary of how the track operations were through this current season. I know it's not the fiscal year end and the calendar year and all that, but just an update on the numbers there, horses, this sort of thing, and any of the projects, which I know became of interest to a number of the owners here this last season, any of the projects to improve the property that we have planned over the next 12 months to 2 years. I think it'd be a good update on that. Council good with that? Yeah, okay. Are there any other questions for Mr. Wagner?
I don't have a question. I've had 3 people specifically tell me in the past 3 weeks how much they enjoy working with you and appreciate working with you. One is the president of the, is it driving or riding club?
Driving and training.
One is the organizer of the triathlon at the lake, and the other is the organizer of the World Golf Cart Championships. Both have gone out of their way to tell me what a pleasure you are to work with.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Now, Mark, you were going to make, I think, comments too on the other part of the, were those comments meant to cover both the track restaurant and the tack shop?
Yes.
Okay, fine. I didn't know if we wanted to handle them differently. Is there a motion to approve the new contracts for the track restaurant and the tack room?
I'll move to authorize the mayor or his designee to execute the 5-year lease agreements from July 1, 2022 to June 30, 2027 with Tracy Cormier for the track restaurant and with Wayne and Janet Rasmussen doing business as the Country Saddler for the tack shop at the harness track.
That's motion by Jane Hogeman. And a second, please?
Second.
A second by Pat Pizzella. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. That motion carries. Thank you all very much. Mark, thank you. Move on to item number 5. Jeff?
Thanks, John. Doug's making his way up to the microphone. As Lydia mentioned, we had a pretty good meeting last week regarding the proposed walkway projects on Pine Vista and Mackenzie. And based on previous engagement we had with the public on that, and surveys we've done, and the results of that meeting, Doug's going to recommend that we move forward, and we're just looking for your approval to move forward with that process.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add from that, but we surveyed all the residents on Mackenzie Road and on Pine Vista. The results came back overwhelmingly in support of walkways in those areas. From the survey, we decided the north side of Pine Vista and I guess it would be the south side of Mackenzie would be the areas we'd put the walkway on. We did get a little bit of feedback, and it was overall very positive. A couple of concerns about hopefully we could put a crosswalk in over Highway 5 to connect those. And then maybe some concerns if we could not use screenings, if we could use a material that would blend in well in the Old Town neighborhood. So those are concerns that we had as well that we're happy to address, and we'll get that going. So yeah, that's basically all we have. We're looking forward to putting these walkways in. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
And Doug, I'm looking at your calendar here. So the completion of both these walks would be sometime in September, early fall, I guess you're saying, right?
That's the
Once
hope. That's a pretty aggressive timeline, but we hope to be able to do it, yeah.
All right, fine. And it's good to see a nice interest on the part of the neighbors. I know Mackenzie a little better than Pine Vista, but they've been interested in that walkway for some time, so I'm glad that can happen. All right, any other questions for Doug Willardson? Seeing none, is there a motion to proceed?
I move to direct staff to continue the design and construction process for walkways along Pine Vista Drive and Mackenzie Road using screenings as the preferred construction material where topographically possible.
That's a motion by Lydia Bosch. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Jane Hogeman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you very much, Doug. That will bring us to item number 6 in the regular meeting. Are there any other piece of business that a council member or staff wish to bring to this regular meeting? Seeing none, we'll move to item number 7, which is comments from attendees. Does the clerk have the list, please? Thank you. We have 16 people speak. Mostly, it looks like maybe all of it is on short-term rentals. Before I call the first speaker, I'll just outline a few requests of our policy on comments. First of all, if you could please keep your comments to 3 minutes or so, we would appreciate that. If you're down the list of the signed up speakers, and you find as you're listening to other speakers that your comments are very much the same, it's okay if you decide not to make your comments, but that's purely up to you. and all of you who are signed up on the list tonight will have the opportunity to speak if you so wish. Please address the council and any other members of the audience in a respectful way. And I will then move to call the first couple of names. The first name is Brandon Goodman, and it'll be followed by Brian Lally, and I'll read the next person up as we go through the list. Brandon, good afternoon, and I guess I would just ask all of you, you can speak either from that podium or the desk in front of it. Please, in either case, get as close to that microphone as you can so that not only in Village Hall, but those listening on the live stream can hear you. We've had some concerns on listeners on live stream that they're not always able to pick it up, even though our tech staff is trying to do that. Brandon, I didn't take any minutes off your time, don't worry.
Good.
Go right ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Village Council members. My name is Brandon Goodman, and I live at 155 East Indiana Avenue in Southern Pines. I am puzzled as to why we have not seen any data-driven effort to identify problems that warrant a solution. Most of what I have heard is anecdotal and hyperbole. I think it's safe to say if you go looking for a problem, you are bound to find it. John from Georgia, 8 adults and 1 child, coming to celebrate my father-in-law's 80th birthday, who already lives in Pinehurst. Barbara from Virginia, 8 adults. We are coming to town for a family memorial service. Scott from Ohio, 10 adults. I am coming with friends of 40 years to play golf in the area. Carol from North Carolina, 10 adults. Will you have any decorations for Christmas? We are excited to visit Pinehurst. 10 ladies headed your way. Carol's group went to the spa, ate at the village restaurants, and shopped at our retail stores. Andy from Georgia had 12 adults, a guest for 5 straight years. We really appreciate the hospitality of Pinehurst. William from North Carolina, 4 adults. Quail hunting trip for retired friends. Enjoyed our stay so much, we booked next year before we even left. Jane from Virginia, 8 adults, 4 children. Celebration of life for my mother by 3 generations. Alan from North Carolina, whose group is from all over the country, 11 adults. This group of retired folks has made good on a golf trip for 39 years. Prior to 2016, they came to Pinehurst every other year. They no longer come every other year. They come every year. Alan and his group have been a guest for 7 straight years because they love it. Rick, he's from New York, and many of his guests are from the free state of Florida. 12 adults. They are all friends, originally from Rochester. Their first trip was last year, and they booked this year's trip as soon as they left last year. They were here this past weekend and departed on Sunday. Yesterday, they booked for next year. Why? Because they don't want to go anywhere else. Some of you really want to ban these people? These are good people. I'm in favor of dealing with nuisance properties of all types. In fact, I encourage it. Make them famous right here. Call them out, act on it, and leave the rest of us alone. I am not in favor of defining these guests, John, Barbara, Scott, Carol, Andy, William, Jane, Alan, Rick, and many, many more, as a nuisance or as undesirable. They are not. They are welcome. They always have been, and they should continue to be.
Thank you. Brian Lally. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't normally applaud or make other comments for the speakers. Let them speak, and their message will be carried. Brian Lally is the next speaker, followed by Mary Ann Wider. Mr. Lally. If you are going to use that chair, just push the button on that device, and it'll turn green, hopefully. Brandon, thank you. And draw that microphone as close to you can. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, my name is Brian Lally. I live at 80 Market Square Road in the village of Pinehurst. My parents, Jack and Peg, and I they retired here in 1985. I was with them. They're no longer with us. I'm a golf professional by trade. For 7 years, I have been a concierge for short-term rental guests, helping them feel like a local, offering services like in-home chef, transportations, recommendations on how to play golf and where to play golf in our area. And during those 7 years, I've come to know many guests who return here yearly, and these are really great, desirable people. I was reading about the vision, the mission, and the values here at the bottom of your agenda. And it seems like to me if we worked as a group and adhered to those, that this short-term rental issue would not be on the agenda for much longer. And that's really all I have to say about that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Mary Ann Wydra, followed by Teresa Jones. No, we can't. Once you switch to the other chair, the light's already on there, Mary Ann. Thank you.
All right, can you hear me? Okay. I will keep this under 3 minutes, okay? No?
Bring the microphone as close as you comfortably can.
Okay.
The technician will adjust it a little bit as you go along, but please
Okay.
proceed.
All right, thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to conclude my comments from the last council meeting. The 2018 Pilot newspaper reported that there were only 68 short-term rentals in the village, 68. In 2022, the count sits at 400 and growing rapidly. In February 2022, Darren Birch, Director of Pinehurst Planning and Inspections, emphasized the need for regulations of STRs. Quote, there's really no regulations that we have on the books on short-term rentals. We don't have them defined, we don't have them mapped, and we don't have a current regulatory approach. As I said before, this issue's been kicked down the road, but we've got to resolve this problem. And then my call was, the village government must not make a regulation decision behind closed doors. It erodes trust, as my friends Brandon and Brian here said. We got to get out and talk to each other. If the Village Pinehurst can't or will not do that due to conflicts of interest or other relationships, then an impartial arbitrator should be brought in. A SWOT analysis should be done to facilitate a realistic, fact-based, data-driven look at the problem. Good decisions cannot be made from different sets of data. Don't expect stakeholders to accept the decision, back it up with facts. The results must then be presented so an impartial decision can be made. Just as real quick, I'm going to wrap it up here. Police reporting and record keeping for the past 6 years, residents have been directed to a non-emergency police number when they have trouble with short-term rentals. Logs don't exist for this. So this renders Jake Sutherland and Marcus LaRoe's statements in the last council meeting invalid when he said police records do not show a crime increase due to STRs. While the STR owners and property managers snooze peacefully with their families in other towns, the adjacent Pinehurst homeowners serve as the first line of security to report problems. Why is that? And then I'm going to wrap up here. Opinions of STR property managers and adjunct services. Why are the opinions of short-term rental property management and other services not residing in Pinehurst being considered on a public policy? These people come into our community to make money, are compensated by their employers, and leave. They do not pay local Pinehurst taxes, only federal and state. Why is their opinion being considered over one of Pinehurst homeowners, one of their largest financial assets, their homes and neighborhoods? In closing, I ask that you honor your pledge to the residential taxpayers to preserve and enhance Pinehurst residential neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we go on to the next speaker, Mr. Lally, you show an address here of 80 Market Square. Is that a business or a home? 80 Market Square in Pinehurst. Thank you. Next speaker is Teresa. Thank you. And I'm not sure I pronounced your last name correctly, so please add to that.
Nobody gets it right. It's Johns. Teresa
Thank you.
Johns.
I should somehow know that, I think, but go right ahead. Thank you.
I live at 50 Glen Abbey Trail in Pinehurst, and I'm speaking in support of allowing short-term rentals to continue. I've heard some that are opposed to short-term rentals say that because HOAs don't allow short-term rentals, they must have a good reason for not allowing them. That, to me, is illogical to say because HOAs don't allow them, there must be a good reason, therefore we should not allow them throughout the village of Pinehurst. If short-term rentals are banned, what is your plan for accommodating the many people who use short-term rentals and aren't here on a golf vacation? What about travel nurses? What about local families that are having their home repaired or renovated that utilize these short-term rentals that don't want to stay in a hotel room with 2 or 3 kids for a month or more while their house is being worked on? So what would be the plan for that if you ban short-term rentals? And there definitely are not enough hotel rooms in Pinehurst to accommodate visitors. A friend texted me just today that they tried to reserve a hotel room for a Saturday night in June for any hotel in Pinehurst, and none are available. If people decide to still vacation here instead of the many other eastern and southern U.S. golf destinations, they will take their lodging and dining money and tax revenue to other nearby cities and counties. Once people find out there are other nice places for golf vacations besides Pinehurst because they couldn't get lodging here, how do you plan to get them to come back?
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Colette Kalinsky, followed by Shaughnessy Lindquist. Colette Kalinsky.
Very short. My name is Colette Kalinsky, 25 Queens Court. It is not surprising that realtors are, at the last meeting, supported short-term rentals, since along with VRMA, Vacation Rental Management Associates out of Bald Island, or NCVRMA out of Greensboro, were the primary push for SB 483.2019, sponsored by McGinnis. I would like to read a quote from NCVRMA, Step Up Short-Term Rental Advocacy. The quote, North Carolina Realtor members and staff are currently undertaking to replicate the successes in other areas in multiple communities, pursuing hostile regulations including Burke County, Pinehurst, Southern Pines, and Southport. You can look it up. It's under what I said. Does Pinehurst hostility include exercising the seldom cited part of the law which allows for mandatory registration if a property has 4 or more violations in 12 months or 2 in 30 days? The sticking point in this issue is that that the complaints that citizens say they are making are not happening. And if they are not recorded with the police, then those don't count towards the 4 issues in 12 months or 2 in 30 days. So I suggest that residents take videos, pictures, or email a third party if they have contacted the police, or send a copy of that email to whoever they deem needs that evidence, including the Attorney General if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Shaughnessy Lindquist, followed by Jordan Mellott.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for this opportunity to speak. My name is Shaughnessy, and I am a resident in Pinehurst, a young adult living in Pinehurst, and a young professional working in Pinehurst. And I come to the stand today not as pro-short-term rental or anti-short-term rental, but as pro-community. What I have seen on both sides is anecdotal evidence and asking for empirical evidence and data, unbiased data about the effect of short-term rentals on our market, local businesses, homeowners, etc. And I do think it would be to the best benefit of our community if we could have a study done by a third-party organization, which would give us unbiased data and the ability to make a decision which is going to directly impact local property owners and local businesses. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Mellott, Jordan. And Jordan, what is a residence I can write down for you, please? 193 Sandy Springs Road in Aberdeen.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So first, I would like to thank the Village of Pinehurst for allowing me to speak. I am a resident of Moore County, and I also am a young employee. I feel very passionate about the subject at hand because I am an assistant property manager and a proud realtor. I would first like to direct my comments to the residents not in favor of vacation homes. When you moved to Pinehurst, you chose to live in a resort community. I'm sure it was probably one of the many factors that piqued your interest. I would like to remind those opposing vacation rentals that they host many different groups besides the quote-unquote rambunctious golfer. We host wedding groups, families visiting town to say their final goodbyes to loved ones, high school reunions, young golfers and their families as they get to play at Pinehurst for the first time, and military families PCSing to brag that cannot commit a year rental or afford multiple nights or multiple months in hotel rooms. While I understand that valid concerns have been presented, it seems unfair to take away the opportunity to visit this great town because minor grievances are far and few between. Recently, false statistics and statements have begun circling regarding vacation homes, management companies, and owners. I understood some have concerns, which many I sympathize with. When I spoke to you last meeting regarding your issues, I offered my contact information and solutions, but you turned away. Week after week, residents are asking for restrictions and solutions. I'm sorry, I lost my place. Information and solutions, but I'm so sorry. And an effort from property managers, but yet we are still here with open minds and ears, and you are still not happy. Like any other business, we are not perfect, but like many other great and thriving businesses in the area, we have learned and made adjustments to correct our wrongs. We have added parking limits, employees to clean up and take care of trash, night minimums, a welcome letter going over major rules and regulations for guests upon check-in, occupation limits on all homes, and major repercussions if law enforcement is called for valid reasons. I refuse to be silent as some of you spread false information to the council and other residents about statistics and property managers. Opinions are not facts. Finally, to the council and everyone in this room, Pinehurst is a resort community. Without vacation homes, we are simply just another community with a resort, taking special identity away from the beautiful and historic community. I am valid that there is a way for us to fix this issue, many of which my colleagues have said, whether it's a hotline or a committee. It will not be a beautiful day in Pinehurst when our community is not desired vacation spot anymore. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Todd Camplin, followed by Felicia Riley. Todd?
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Todd Camplin. I'm a resident of West End. I live at 101 Simmons Drive in West End, but I've worked in Pinehurst since 2000 as a golf professional for 13 years at Pinehurst number 7. Got my realtor's license in 2014. Worked for Sandhills Rentals as the vacation rental manager for 2+ years, and am currently managing the rental program at Forest Creek Golf Club, as well as have my own firm, Camplin Realty and Property Management, in which I manage 4 condos in Pinehurst, as well as 6 single-family homes. Of the thousands of transactions I've done in the last 4+ years, there have been 3 times in which I have been contacted, and 1 time in which the Pinehurst Police Department has been contacted. And that was probably only due to 2 points. One is it was a one-night rental at a single-family home, something that I don't allow at any of my single-family homes any longer. And just chalk that up to you live, you learn. And I would recommend that for all property managers or anyone doing short-term rentals, that you do not allow one-night rental at a single-family home. Secondly is I had yet to take the opportunity to meet the neighbors, as I typically try to do with around all of the short-term rentals that I manage. I won't stand here and tell you I've met every single neighbor around every single property, but it is something that I try to do, pass along my information and just tell them that if there ever is a problem, to contact me, and I'll take care of it. My point in sharing this is to add some numbers to what I have found to be largely anecdotal arguments. I don't think there's nearly a high enough incident rate to talk about banning or severely regulating short-term rentals in Pinehurst. I've heard some accusations about increased incidents and crime in the area. I haven't seen one single number to back up any of those allegations. Further, the Village of Pinehurst Resort and the Convention and Visitors Bureau has spent millions of dollars over the last few years, or a number of years, to tab this area as the home of American golf. And now we're just going to turn a major spigot off of what gives people the outlet to get here and to recognize this area. I think that would be an awful decision for the area as well as the many stakeholders, including those who own restaurants and retail businesses. I can tell you that in working with a number of these individuals and booking these trips and putting together golf packages for them, that they'll just decide to go elsewhere, many of them. Some of them will just move over to hotel rooms. A lot of them will take their dollars and go elsewhere because all the rage is being able to stay under the same roof and to share the experience of a meal around a table instead of, sitting in a hotel room. And then, the First Amendment is largely, it's a foundation of this country and one of the many things that makes this country the greatest country on earth, if you ask me. It's what allows me to stand here and everyone else to speak their mind. Unfortunately, it's difficult to fact check some of these things. And as we've learned in recent years with the 24-hour news cycle, if you say something loud enough and enough times, then it must be true, right? I respectfully disagree with those making all the noise about short-term rental problems in Pinehurst. I think if you seek facts and take your time in making this decision and don't make a knee-jerk decision, that you'll find that the benefits to short-term rentals in the village of Pinehurst far outweigh the negatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Felicia Riley, followed by Kathleen Erickson. Felicia.
Good evening, Council. My name is Felicia Riley. I'm a resident.
Just speak up, just bring the microphone a little bit closer. Thank you very much.
Sure. I'm a resident at 30 Lost Tree Road in Pinehurst and also a short-term rental owner. I very much empathize with other residents in my community that have experienced uncertainty because of short-term rentals. But I'm hoping there is middle ground that can be found for all residents and not a full-blown ban. I own and operate 2 short-term rentals as supplemental income as my husband is retired military. We work hard to be able to afford living in such a safe and beautiful community like Pinehurst. One of our short-term rentals has definitely been opposed by some of the neighbors since we became the owners in 2018. My solution was to form a relationship with those neighbors and do my best to keep the integrity of the neighborhood intact. Some are still not happy, but they have no reason for complaint anymore as I've addressed and found solutions to every problem that they've had. I'm learning that even when you bend over backwards, it just won't be good enough for some people. Unfortunately, some will never be truly satisfied until the home is no longer a short-term rental. How sad it is that these folks are only seeing the bad and not the good that the short-term rentals bring to Pinehurst. For me, owning and operating a short-term rental is my livelihood. It allows me to work from home most days, and days that require cleanings, the hours are perfectly timed to not be scrambling to get my son to and from school. The extra income also allows me to provide my son with the best services as he is a special needs child. Being able to make my own hours has been a godsend for my family life. One of our rentals is one of the top rented short-term rentals on Airbnb. Guests rave in the guest book about how peaceful the area is and how much they look forward to returning. They have no desire to be cooped up in a hotel room. The resort is obviously a great option for visitors that are wishing to golf, as you get the tee time benefits, but not everyone comes here to golf or has the budget to stay at the resort. I have guests that come because they are considering retiring or moving to the area and want to get a feel for what it's like actually living in a neighborhood of Pinehurst. I host folks who travel here for work, couples who are on their honeymoon or their anniversary, writers seeking inspiration, everyday people looking for a quiet respite. Even local residents here book sometimes because they just want to get alone and they don't want to be bothered. I'm not denying that there are some guests that have come here and not minded their manners, or owners that don't take this responsibility seriously. But what a slap in the face it would be to a person like me who's worked so hard for the life that I'm currently living. To me, it's like having my rights stripped away, and I feel that the council really needs to think hard and long to do right by all the residents of Pinehurst.
Thank you. And Felicia, I'll make note as I'll try with the next couple of speakers. We did receive a letter from you today on that, and I tried to respond to every letter we've received, but I'm not sure we've covered that. Thank you. Kathleen Erickson, followed by John Webster. Kathleen Erickson, please.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Erickson. I live at 205 McCaskill Road. I've only been a resident here for a year and a half, but some people will notice my face because I've become involved in community volunteering, and also I have voted for first time here in Pinehurst, and I'm working on helping the voting system. I'm speaking because I have always been involved in government. I feel that's very important to be engaged. I started in Madison, Wisconsin, where there was a lot of activity going on in the 60s. Then I spent almost 50 years in Knoxville, Tennessee, where we had the 1983 World's Fair. The reason I'm speaking is because I believe that you are experiencing extreme growing pains here. I've seen this happen before, and my concern is the polarization that's happening. And I would like to see an active committee or something. I checked out the advisory boards. I'm not sure how this could be worked out, but I believe everybody that's spoken here today has something important to say. And I think we have an unusually educated, well-spoken, well-informed population and council. I cannot stress enough how much I believe that if we slow down this train a little bit and have more, as people are talking about, facts, but also bring together, because I've noticed that neighbors are being pitted against neighbors and things like that are happening. That's not helpful to the entire process and will be a problem moving forward. So if there's some way that we that are concerned can be involved in a way that might bring people together, I just don't think that we're going to have either or. I think a good plan always takes into consideration all the stakeholders. I have nothing more to say, but thank you for the opportunity, and I'm really enjoying Pinehurst.
Thank you for those comments. John Webster, followed by Matt Kenny.
Good afternoon. I do live in Pinehurst, 140 West Mackenzie.
Mr. Webster, you have to bring the microphone a little closer or raise it up, or you can use the desk here if you wish. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. As I said, I live in Pinehurst, 140 West Mackenzie. Before I start, I just wanted to tell Jeff one thing. I think when you were talking about sales tax, you meant property tax, right? You were going to reduce the property tax rate? I don't think you fixed the sales tax. Right.
Yeah, my apology if I said sales tax. I was talking about our property tax rate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry to come to the council with something I've already written a letter to you about, but I think for the public record, I'd like to make a few comments about it. So at the last meeting, Marcus LaRose informed you that without STRs in Pinehurst, the village would need to increase its tax rate, its property tax rate, by 8 cents, which is equivalent to about $3.1 million or 13% of the revenue that Pinehurst has as a municipality. So I've tried to analyze this claim by looking at the different potential sources of revenue, and I'm going to bore you by going through them. The first one is the local option sales tax, and that, I'm afraid, is based on population. So for every STR that we have to assume that's 2.2 residents that we don't have, and therefore our population is statistically depressed, and therefore we get less of a share of the local option sales tax than we otherwise would. And this works out, assuming that we have 5% of the houses in Pinehurst are now STRs, that means we're getting $300,000 less than we should have. The next one is the ad valorem property tax. That tax is on the houses, whether they're STRs or not, so it doesn't really matter. But cars do. So vehicles are not held by residents, by vacationers here, and therefore we lose out on our share of that, and that works out at $20,000. Another potential source is the 3% occupancy tax, and that is dedicated entirely to the county to bring yet more tourists. And therefore, we get the exact number, or the municipality gets the exact number of 0. The next one is other unrestricted intergovernmental revenues, which is basically taxes on telecoms, video, electricity, alcohol, and whole harmless reimbursement. Now, most of these are determined by usage, and it turns out that the average occupancy of an SDR is 60%, so I assume, therefore, as they are based on usage, we're actually losing out partially on this. On the other hand, the hold harmless is based on a per capita basis, and we're losing $35,000 as a result. Then there's the restricted intergovernmental revenues, very small items, except for the Powell bill, and that is a mixture of a per capita rate and the number of street miles maintained. So once again, we're losing out on that. Some will argue that SDRs cause more police work, as evidenced by the infamous 2020 pool party at the Magnolia Road property managed by Marcus LaRose, but I have not attempted to quantify that either. So according to my calculations, SDRs cause the village a net revenue deficit of $312,000. So Pinehurst SDRs, rather than contributing the equivalent of 8 cents of property tax, are actually being subsidized by the rest of Pinehurst taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. The next speaker is Matt Kenny, followed by Courtney Jones. And Matt, I believe we have a message from you today as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, you did. Can you hear me?
I think so. Thank you.
Great. Mayor and Councilman, thank you for hearing me. I'm going to start off as a little bit of a love story. I live in Greensboro, North Carolina since 1980, and I've been coming to Pinehurst probably since 1990 to play golf, to come to the village. About 4 years ago, I came down to play golf, and it was a beautiful day. It was in April, and we went into the village after we played golf. We wanted to get something to eat, and I remember walking around, and all the streets were closed off because it was a first Friday. And so we just decided we were going to spend a night. We're going to, have fun and enjoy the town. And I realized that night when I was walking around experiencing everything that this was the place that I wanted to live. This is where I wanted to retire. I was in love with this city and this village. So to that end, about, 6-8 months after that, we bought a house down here, 60 Barrett Road West. I loved the house, put a lot of money and effort into making it perfect, exactly the way we wanted it. The problem is that we both have jobs and we have family in other places that require us to be there and to have help. So the only way that we really could afford to maintain multiple residences was to be able to have a short-term VRBO, short-term rental, and try to, cover some of the costs that we have. 3 years that we've been doing this, we've rented it multiple times. We spend probably 30 to 40% of our personal time here in Pinehurst. We love it. We get here every chance we can. And in that time, we've rented it. Our renters have supported the restaurants. They've supported the grocery stores where they go and they shop. They support the gas stations. They support the gift shops. They support all the golf courses. And we personally support the people who clean the house and the people who do the landscaping when we're not here. So all these people are affected when we don't have short-term rentals or when you limit short-term rentals. We're taking the support away from these people. One thing that has never happened in the entire time that we've rented our place is that have we had an issue or a problem? We've had no complaints. We take a lot of care to make sure that the people we're renting to are people that we don't think are going to have a problem. We take a lot of caution and care to have rules set up so that we will not have parties of more than 12, in our home. We take care to make sure what we're doing, we do right. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker is Courtney Jones, followed by Jeff Heinz.
Yes.
Courtney?
Courtney Jones, 60 Barrett Road West in Pinehurst. So to follow up what Matt had just said, I think the biggest thing is social change happens. There are 1.37 million short-term rental properties in the U.S. Home rentals in residential communities is not something new. It's just something that's becoming more commonplace. Pinehurst has always been a vacation destination. With the USGA's announcement of Pinehurst being a new headquarters and the U.S. Open to play here every 5 years, all eyes are on Pinehurst. This will bring even more visitors to this community than ever before. My understanding is that there is roughly 1.14 million tourists to Moore County annually. Short-term rentals are valuable to Pinehurst to help house tourists, giving them an alternative to resorts, an alternative to the resort or out-of-town lodging. It brings business and revenue to local businesses like restaurants, stores, golf courses, the grocery store, as well as supporting local businesses like the cleaning people, maintenance businesses, and the landscapers. So prior to making any rash decisions, I hope that you consider investing in an economic impact study, because I think, like everybody said here, it's important for us to analyze what short-term rentals bring to the community. And I too, as a homeowner, would like to work with anybody who is opposing this to find ways that we can work together, because I think that there's a good solution for everybody involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Jeff Heinz, followed by Philip Sonia. Mr. Heinz.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Council and ladies and gentlemen. I speak with respect to the material you're going to review in your work session later this evening. I don't want you to be discouraged by the material you have before you. It is, to me, disappointing in that virtually every idea that's expressed in it is qualified by a statement along the lines of, well, preempted by Wilmington or unclear. Generally speaking, the use of these qualifiers is not appropriate. If you read the 9-page summary of the Wilmington decision that was released by the UNC School of Government, it, like Wilmington itself, clearly identifies sensible, fair-minded regulations that can be enacted to govern short-term rentals without unduly interfering with the business activities of those who choose to engage in this industry. And by the way, it is an industry. It's not home sharing. Home sharing is when you come over to my place and I'm there and we spend the evening and you leave and you go home and I go to bed. But when you occupy my property in my absence and without any oversight by me and you pay me and I can't get you out of there unless I evict you, that's a business. And it's inconsistent with single-family resident living. There's been a lot of hand-wringing about permitting and enforcement. These are red herrings and you should avoid them. Permitting is not necessary to an effective and reasonable regulatory scheme. It's basically just a way of making a list of the short-term rentals. And Brenda Exeteris has provided that for us months ago. With respect to enforcement, it's largely going to be citizen-driven. Once the citizens of the community realize that the village has their backs and has enacted a regulatory scheme that can protect them, and that there is a record-keeping system that accurately reflects the activities of the short-term rental business in Pinehurst. I know I sound like a broken record about this, but it is a simple matter to draft an enforceable, even-handed, comprehensive short-term rental ordinance. Communities all over the state are doing so. Why aren't we? A final point about ongoing inaction. We hear a lot about individual rights and economic impact from short-term rental advocates, but we don't hear much about how many short-term rentals in Pinehurst will be enough. And that's because they don't know. If they were to address that issue, I suppose they'd say, let the market make that determination. But the problem with leaving it to the market is that markets don't make value judgments. Markets don't gauge the impact on ancillary situations like the single-family residential community, where the neighborhood's character and quality of life are sacrificed by unchecked short-term rental growth. If it's commodities you're talking about in the market, that's fine. Prices go up, demand goes down, the market stabilizes, the cycle starts all over again. But if we allow the cycle to proceed unchecked here, we're going to lose our neighborhoods forever. Respectfully, you need to act, and you need to act now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heinz. The next speaker is Philip Sonia.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
I think so, Philip.
Hi, I'm
And
Philip
Philip,
Sonia.
just want to check, I want to have an address for you if I could. We
Yeah,
didn't get that
absolutely.
last time.
29 Bedford Circle.
29 Bedford Circle, Pinehurst.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So briefly, I introduced myself last time. I was up here. I'm a colonel in the Army. I'm retiring this month after really about 33 years in uniform. I'm a resident of Pinehurst for the last 15 years. My wife passed away here. She's buried here. I'm not leaving here. I'm raising my 2 young girls here, and I plan to continue to do so. And I cannot think of a better town to raise my children in. So if you think someone's passionate about the character of this town, I'm one of those individuals, and I will do anything to help this community. I want the best for this community, and I want to maintain the character that's here, and I want the best for all of us. On a national level, you know, as my background, if you will, it's West Point grad, MBA, MMAS, PhD in public policy, specifically focused on property rights. There's a couple of us property rights PhDs here in your town. 2 of us are analysts for those kind of items. On a national level, look, we're nearing a recession. On March 21st, the bond yield curve's inverted. That's not a maybe chance you're getting a recession. That's a definite chance you're getting a recession within 12 months. I'd be very cautious with doing something preemptive to an economy of this nature before that occurs. My recommendation is that, again, we have a very open discussion. Let's share data. Let's not go off of anecdotes. Let's pull out the real data conducted through multiple cities across our country and across Europe and bring that data to light. Let people see it. Let us share those findings. Let us share examples. I invite all parties to come with an open mind and look for solution sets that everyone can prosper from. I think that third-party study should include, again, communication, moderation, solution development, and resolve the issues for all parties. I recommend that this moderation discussion is conducted in the open with internally elected members, so not members of the council. I would see it as our duty to present those options to the council as agreed upon the overall body. And I think that should occur in order to give you more time to go through your assessments as well and have a balanced set of resources that you're able to study on this. Some will say that this is all about the money. I'll tell you that money is a motivator for many. I would ask us to really look at some of those other effects that you may or may not notice. One thing that you'll notice, and you know, during this last discussion, I spent the last 2 weeks kind of going through all the academic reports on this, looking at what short-term rental buyers buy, how they buy it, how they rate items. This is what I've found. Number one, it's really the low-quality properties that short-term rental guys go after. They purchase those, they upgrade them, and they maintain them at an incredibly high level. The reason why they do that is because they're in competition. They're in competition to make sure everything works every single day, unlike long-term renters or rental owners. Those are actually 2 totally different fields, and I think the academic studies will show that they don't influence each other. Employment, we should think about, you know, we do have a labor shortage here, but think about who some of these guys employ. They employ a property manager, plumber, electrician, HVAC, handyman, generalist, lawn care, pool boys, caterers, administrators, lawyers. Who are some of your STR personnel? A lot of them are military, a lot of them are nurses, a lot of them are families coming in to see those parties or medical personnel. A lot of them for conferences and really for families to kind of get together. They also share money against all the other shops that see around you. So again, it's about the multiplier effect. Every dollar that's spent somewhere here stays here, but it revolves 15 times. And that's what people don't understand is every dollar spent revolves 15 times. Every dollar spent by the government is worth about 10 cents in that economy in the way that it revolves. So there's some important items to know about. And so people ask me about some of the studies. Impact on short-term rental regulations on hotel industry, a difference in difference approach. It's important difference in difference. That's taking the overall population and comparing it to what's going on locally. What you'll find from that is that we really don't look any different on the rental markets. We don't look any different at all. Short-term rental regulations have a positive ripple effect on low-scale hotels. Not my opinion, it's a published peer-reviewed paper. No effect on hotel performance at all, especially on luxury hotels. Positive effect is found on other types of hotels, so the lower-level hotels actually get higher efficiency and higher boarding numbers. The effects of short-term rental regulations differs based upon the scale of those hotels, but what it does is it basically shows that there's a very positive economic response from short-term rentals. And again, there are other studies that will give somewhat of a negative remark, but I polled in just a matter of 2 weeks, something like 212 different studies. I'd be more than happy to package all those, do a meta-analysis of it, back brief you, lead a discussion on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Philip. The next speaker is Deborah Layler.
Good evening. Thank you for giving us all the opportunity to speak. My name is Debbie Layler. I live at 80 Azalea Road, and I really would like to address my comments to the audience and some comments that were made earlier, rather than to you all, because you all know where I stand on this stuff.
Well, Ms. Layler, I'm sorry, the comments are to the council. Everybody
They are
can
to the
hear you.
council,
So
but I hope that people behind, I would like to clarify some comments that were made earlier.
you can speak to the council to make those. I'm sure it'll work out. Thank you.
Will do. With respect to record keeping, I think it's really important that everybody understand there are no records, as far as I understand it, that the non-emergency phone number at the police department is not structured in such a way as to allow the identification of complaints relative to short-term rentals, nor has it ever been. So for the past 6 or 7 years, when citizens would come to the council with their concerns and complaints and were told to call the police department and did, I think it's fair to say that everybody assumed somebody was keeping track of the phone calls. They were not. Moreover, although there is a new software program about to be installed at the police department for the non-emergency number, that program is also not currently programmed to allow for the identification of complaints specifically related to short-term rentals. So there is no data. When people say, let's get together and look at the data, what you have are the citizens coming up over the past few months to speak, because there's no resource to turn to that's going to say over the past quarter, over the past 6 months, whatever, we've had 30 phone calls. Unfortunately, that's not there. I hope that the village IT department will address itself to this problem, and so that the non-emergency phone number CAD system can be structured in such a way that problems from these rentals can be identified and cataloged and added up. Similarly, all the speakers tonight are clearly professional. I believe there's only one homeowner who rents his home when he's out of town. And it seemed as though most other people, and I include people who have more than one short-term rental, are professionals making their living, earning money on it. I've been one myself. But you guys are the good eggs. You wouldn't be here if people were filing complaints against you. So it is your brethren who are poor property managers, who do not provide good oversight, do not monitor their tenants. Those are the people that we all are trying to address. It's great that you are all here. It would be even better if you would band together into some sort of business association, self-governing, and try to out the people who do not do a good job running their short-term rentals. Because although the village can proceed to do certain regulations, sorry, don't look at your watch. Anyway, I know there are people who are professional property managers. You all have been made great presentations tonight. I think you all ought to get together and figure out how you can work with the village and among yourselves to identify the people who are not so good. As another resident mentioned at the last council meeting, why wouldn't you want to be regulated? If you can come up with some sort of something to put on your website to say you are a part of the Pinehurst short-term rental organization, something that would give you a little bit extra panache or something. The issue about property rights, and another woman spoke about how it's her right to do this, but what about the rights of the neighbors who bought their homes thinking they were buying into a neighborhood? I know Councilman Morgan at the last meeting made a very strong statement about property rights, and there are two sides to every story, and that's why you get people together.
Ms. Later, could you bring your comments to a conclusion,
Yes.
please? Thank you.
I also think it would be interesting if the people who spoke in favor of short-term rentals identified whether or not they live next to one that's managed by somebody else.
Thank you very much. Council, that is the end of the persons who have signed up. If there are others who wish to speak who have not signed up, is it the desire to hear other comments tonight, or should we go on to the work session? Anybody feel about?
I want to hear anybody that wants to speak.
Sorry?
I want to hear anybody that wants to
Carry
speak.
on. All right. Is there anybody who hasn't signed up? I'm assuming the council members agree with that, what Jeff suggested. All right.
Absolutely.
If there are any members or visitors who have not signed up who wish to speak, please come to the microphone and slowly and clearly give me your name and address, and I'll write that down for our records. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Debbie Putz. I live at 1 Sandhills Place in Pinehurst. I am a property manager at Village of Pinehurst Rentals and have been so for 17 years. We manage about 140 properties, combination long-term unfurnished and furnished. We do everything from soup to nuts. We are the property manager that most of my competitors do it the right way. There's good and bad in every industry. I'd like to say the vast majority of the rentals are managed properly here, whether it be by me, a licensed agent specializing in property manager, or homeowners who are not absentee owners and do it themselves. I think we need to separate the men from the boys. I believe that we do not want a bad reputation. I've had a noise complaint. The person has been evicted. I've had a noise complaint. The people are put on a bad list that we share with all the other property managers so they can't take advantage of us and go to the next person. There are a lot of nuances that we do to protect Pinehurst because I don't want you to know who I am. I want to do everything the right way. So whatever we decide to do, I hope that you take into consideration the people. My office has been in the same building for 40 years. We're a contributing member of the village, as a lot of my competitors are, who are also my friends that are in the same business. So we must not be short-sighted. We're willing to work with the village, but please do not make arbitrary constraints that will have a negative impact on the people who are trying to do this in the correct manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? I guess you wish to speak.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you very much. And my name is Marcus LaRose, 85 Ponte Vedra Drive. And I just wanted to make it a point and let you all know where we have gone since the last meeting. We have definitely listened to the complaints and concerns of the people that are not in favor of short-term rentals. We have formed an Pinehurst Home Share Alliance Facebook group. We did that in 2 weeks. We have over 150 members currently right now. The point of that Facebook group is to make sure that we are good stewards of the properties that we own and we manage, making sure that our renters and our neighbors get along. We want to work together. We want to make sure that this is good for everybody. I know, and y'all know, that this is not something that we're going to please everybody, but we want to work with those who are not in favor to come with a common solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak tonight on any subject to the Pinehurst Village Council? Please step forward, ma'am.
Thank you, Marcus. You gave me the energy to speak up. A number of months ago, we were requested. This is a.
Would you, for the.
Can you hear me?
Yourself and your address, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Jean Castanella, 25 Lake Hills Road. A number of months ago, I had someone request that we form a committee to study short-term rentals. We did that. 4 of us started, and it has grown exponentially. But the most important thing that we have done is to provide this council with very sound, fair, incredible information with numbers and with issues within the legal division. You've heard Mr. Hines speak. We have a representation in this group that is very professional, very up to date about all of the information in this community, and that information is growing. So we have provided all of you, Brenda Zatoris has, and she's brilliant, and I know what she has given you is very sound and very tractable, okay? We have not heard responses from you in ways in which we had wished. We are not asking to stop all STRs. So the person or people that suggested that tonight are incorrect. We respect those people who work hard, have businesses, and want to continue earning a living. I've been married 62 years.
Ms. Casanella,
I know what it's, excuse me.
direct your comments to the village council.
I will be
use the mic.
happy to give those comments to you, but also to those who made comments that were a little bit off.
Ms. Casanella, you're
Okay.
directing the comments to the village council of Pinehurst with respect to others, so please just do so. The
I will
microphone
be
is there.
happy to. For those of you who are concerned that this group wants to eliminate STRs, that's not correct. What we want is to be able to know that you have certain guidelines, perhaps restrictions, perhaps ordinances, because those of us who own our homes live that way. We live by rules. I can't put up a fence in my yard over 18 inches because I live on the golf course. It's a rule. I live by that. I didn't put the fence up. I also live with something else in my backyard. I live with short-term rental people who come out at night, men in their underwear, to dance in the water that's being watered to the greens. I watch drunks. I watch people drive from some of the short-term rentals onto the golf course, past my yard and out a side entrance. I hear screaming, I hear yelling, I hear tractors, I hear all kinds of interesting things. And then we watch a short-term rental that parks all of their trucks and cars in a very small yard, creates a traffic hazard the other day, and they were wonderful people, and my husband and I helped get them out. We live with this, and we've lived with it for 20 years, and we're watching a tsunami come. And for those of you who may live in a gated community, God bless you, because you don't put up with it. But we hoped to have been able to stay in our home to retire. That's now in question because our safety is an issue. And for those of you who have forgotten, we don't live in perfect times anymore. So we don't know who is in our community, what they're doing, whether there's prostitution, whether there are issues for little children. We have a ton of young people in this community now, and they ought to be able to go out in their yards and be safe. And when there is a short-term rental that has some problems, those children are at risk.
Ms. Casanella, you're well over 3 minutes.
Let me finish, Mr. Mayor. You let other people speak longer.
Casanella,
All we ask
Conclude your
is that
comments.
we
Thank you.
come together as two groups, short-term rental people who are working very hard to make a living and do good things, and for the residents of this community who live here and who have as much of an investment in many ways as you all, to come together. I asked Marcus LaRose to do that one day. And Marcus, instead of doing that, put together a group to push
Ms.
on us.
Casanella, would you please conclude your
Thank
comments?
you.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak tonight on any subject to the village council? Seeing none, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Katrin Franklin, I don't live in Pinehurst, but I do own a business in Pinehurst. Is that all right with you?
Please draw the microphone up. Thank you very much.
Okay. I own Bump and Baby in the Village. I opened in 2015. Each of you have received an email from me. I am Oh, I'm really sorry. I am Katrin Franklin. I own Bump and Baby in the Village. I opened in 2015, and I emailed each of you a quick email the other day that I'm pro short-term rentals from the business point of view. It is clear and undeniable that tourism drives my business to the point where I was so filled with excitement that I opened a second location in downtown Southern Pines 2 years ago, and it failed miserably, and I've since closed up, and I've come back home to Pinehurst. So my money is made on mostly tourism. We catalog every shopper, we talk to them, we ask where they came from, what's happening, and it's exactly what you've heard here today. People are visiting for the first time, they visit every single year, or they can't wait to retire here, or they own a short-term rental here. It's a myriad of beautiful stories about how this is the place that they want to end up. This is an oasis. What I'm really hearing from all these comments is that I think we're all really on the same page. I think everyone wants this. We understand the tax and revenue implications of this. Certainly, this would negatively impact businesses if it was regulated too much. I don't think anyone's asking for that. I'm just clarifying. But I do think a lot of people that own property that really do want to live here forever are asking for some leadership. And the Village of Pinehurst Council, unfortunately, does have a negative reputation for continued inaction, even with their own ordinances. There are ordinances in place already to protect businesses or residents, et cetera. And categorically, they're sort of just ignored if they're very difficult. And so I would urge you to think about this very carefully, create some ordinances that work, and then actually enforce them. And that really protects businesses, residents, taxpayers, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to speak to the Village Council tonight? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Betsy Say, live at 5 McDonald Road East, and my husband and I own 3 short-term rentals. We live next door to a short-term rental that we don't own or manage, and we've lived there for almost a year, and for 15 years we raised our children across the street from a short-term rental that we did not own or operate. So I just want to put it out there. That question's been asked by a couple people. Do any of you own them and live next door to them? Well, we have, and we do. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Seeing no hands, we'll close this portion of the regular meeting. And I appreciate very much, and I'm speaking on behalf of the staff and the Village Council members here, all the input that we've received, both in written form and in verbal form here tonight. And I'm reminded of one thing that would help the village clerk. Those of you who did make comments tonight, if you have not already, if you could make a copy of that available to the village clerk, that will help us in recording the minutes and getting these conversations on the record. So if you have a copy tonight, you want to leave with her or send to her in the next couple of days, don't wait, please do that. But thank you for your attendance. Is there a motion to adjourn the regular meeting and move to the work session?
I move to adjourn the regular meeting.
That's a motion by Lydia Bosch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Pat Pizzella. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. That carries, and the regular meeting is ended. We will move to the work session at 6:05 p.m.